CEO Mbuvi Ngunze is here to chat with us about KQ then, KQ now, and KQ tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us. Of course, you can join in the conversation if you're joining us on social media. The hashtag is Citizen Business. That's on Facebook and on Twitter. If you're joining us via SMS, please send us an SMS on the on 22422. Mr. Ngunze, thank you so much for joining us. Just to start us off, you've been at the helm of KQ for about 5 months now. How has that experience been?
I guess I would nuance it in various ways. I mean, as I said, I took over at a time of turbulence in our airline, but there's also very interesting opportunities. It's an exciting opportunity because we are, we've just on the back of a good expansion, new fleet that we've just received. The airport is finally turning around, coming together with a new terminal, which we moved into as KQ. So I think that presents its possibilities. Of course, there is the clouds from a business point of view, but we think that there is a strong opportunity.
And of course you had been at KQ for some time. What insights would you say you brought on board as the CEO after serving within KQ for some time?
I played the role of COO for 3 years, Chief Operating Officer, so that is all the operational context of the business, so fairly good grounding. At the same time, I was involved in some of the strategic thinking that has been going on in KQ, so it's not totally new to me. I think it's important that, it was positive for me that I had that background because it allows me now to be able to build on that platform and also to see what are the opportunities there are for the business.
Let's talk about the clouds that you mentioned, and I'd like to start us off with employee relations because that seems to be an issue that has been sticking out as a sore thumb, so to speak. KQ recently announced the retiring of about 10 pilots. The Airline Pilots Associations, however, disagreed with that decision. What informed that decision?
So over the last 2-3 years, we've been on an expansion path, buying new aircrafts and really with a strong ambition. But at the same time, Bella, you remember when we are, Terry-Ann, when you're buying aircrafts, it's a 4-year decision. You make the decision and you're looking for that growth long term. This year alone, I mean, our financial year is the end of March. We had a very strong ambition in terms of where we were going to grow. But you must remember where we are coming from. Every 6 or so months, there's been something within our business environment, particularly with our exposure to Kenya, that has had an impact. I mean, from the elections, we had a strong upsurge. Then the fire came, and after that, you had Westgate, and there have been a whole raft of impacts, particularly in this home market, security-related and all, that have really tripped us up. And we took the decision to actually reduce our capacity. And that made us realize that from a manning point of view on the 777 pilot side, we had an overcapacity in terms of our pilot numbers. Mm-hmm. Within our existing CBA, collective bargaining agreement, there are clauses that allow us to retire people if they've worked for a certain period and if they're of a certain age. And I say this is an internal matter. We will never always agree on employee relations on everything.
You've mentioned the CBA, and I'll just like to ask, according to the CBA, the maximum age of retirement, I understand, is 50.
No.
What is it?
The normal age of retirement is 65.
65.
However, within the CBA, you can retire pilots if you have achieved an age of 50 and you have worked within the company for more than 10 years. So the pilots that we have retired on the retirement list are over 62 and they're on their way to retirement. Mm-hmm. So from a business point of view, we felt we were overmanned on that pilot level, and we use the existing arrangements.
All right, and you've talked about turbulent times every 5 months or so, and I'm just wondering, is there a likelihood of further downsizing your workforce, given that we don't know yet if the challenges in the airline industry are done?
I think the point is that we must remain optimistic in the environment. What we are driving significantly is to find the upsurge. Definitely our exposure to Kenya hurts us because of the security situation, but there's also opportunities in Kenya. When I look, for example, at what has happened to Jambojet and its stimulation in the market, I see that there are possibilities, so I remain hopeful.
All right, talking of possibilities, still on staff matters, we understand some of the cabin crew had their salaries cut by about 30,000 shillings and allowances were cut as well. Is that in light of the turbulence that you spoke about, and can we expect that going forward?
No, actually, I think it's important to understand that every every group of people has a certain arrangement and collective arrangement. So we went in with the union that represents the cabin crew, and we said we want to work much more around productivity rather than paying people allowances which are not productive. And the outcome of that means that we have tightened the way you actually work, and you don't get necessarily allowances that you probably before got, but you'd actually did not fulfill the full obligations. And it's part of a collective arrangement, and it was signed on. We probably have some work to do in terms of improving the monitoring and the management of it, but by and large, what we are focusing on is driving productivity. It should, in the end, make sure that actually we get a better result from the resources that we have.
Okay. I'd like to move on from employee relations into other route issues and aircraft issues, but I just want to finalize by asking, how are you dealing with staff morality? From what we understand from our social media platforms, from people writing to us when we said that you're coming on board, it was very clear that staff morality is very low. What are you doing about it?
So, I think the important thing is to continue engagement. We are not in this business to find a lose-lose. For me, it's important to find a win-win. Even with CALPA, today we had a conciliation meeting. We started part of the conciliation meeting through the Ministry of Labour. So it's never personal. It's about the business, and we will not always agree about everything. But the important thing is that we can be able to find a strong engagement, engaging people, engaging our resources, which my management team and I spend a lot of time doing. We have 4,000 staff, and we have a lot of work on an ongoing basis. And we have a lot of engaged people who are actually delivering excellent service every day to Kenyans and to the world at large.
And I just realized I said staff morality when indeed I meant staff morale.
That's all right.
Tell me though, are you satisfied with your management team? Do you feel that you have the support that you require to take KQ to where you want it to go?
We are working step by step. There are always things that we need to change, but you know, it's you've got to start somewhere and drive engagement, and that is what we are working on. And when I consider my management team, we have 4,000 people plus, and then the others indirectly who work for us. So the management team is not only the top people. I consider that quite a number of large pool of my managers, my management team, and we're driving a lot of engagement to make sure we have a lot of clarity on performance, on drive, on customer relations, and making sure we do the right thing.
All right. Let's move on to aircraft and route issues. What's your response to critics of the airline's fleet expansion? Because some say it's too ambitious given the state of KQ.
In today's context, you cannot not be ambitious, Darianne. It's important that you're ambitious, and KQ expressed its ambition. I think the context that KQ finds itself, particularly because of exposure to this region, meant that some of that ambition is curtailed. We have to take a much more responsible approach right now, just trimming back. But I think the important thing is that the future is around making sure you have a stated ambition. Africa will grow. The markets that are doing business with Africa will grow. Therefore, you cannot remain static. Otherwise, you'll actually perish.
So let's talk about the aircrafts. And some critics argue that African routes are not Embraer-friendly, so to speak. Range, capacity, support, cost of service as well. And they say that compares poorly to, say, the Boeing 737, which has been operating in most of KQ's routes across Africa. So why the Embraer?
So we have a strategy that's very clear. The Embraer fleet was actually a replacement to the 737-300, which was more expensive to operate. And the Embraer is, in fact, you talk about, the jury's out, but what I see, and we get a lot of feedback, a lot of people love the Embraer aircraft. What the Embraer aircraft allows us to do is to go to places more frequently. Thinner routes in Africa, but more frequently. When you look at our region, Entebbe, Dar es Salaam, Lusaka, we have over the last 2-3 years increased our frequency probably by 50% to those places, because we're able to do that with a smaller aircraft that allows us to go more frequently and drives more connectivity through our hub. And that's the strategy behind the Embraer. Then the 737, 800 and 700, further sort of 6-7 hours range, and that allows us to reach further out in Africa.
All right. And why did KQ sell its fleet of the Boeing 767-200? And after all, they were meant for the long-haul flights.
So remember, those aircrafts were dated. So actually, those were being replaced effectively by the Dreamliner 787. So like-for-like replacement, and to be right at the world-class experience, and that's what we have from the 787. So actually the 787 has replaced fully the fleet of the 767s.
But is it true that KQ is going to downscale on the 777?
we are reducing our capacity on the 777-200, which are the older aircrafts we've had in the fleet. As I said, that from a board point of view, we've seen that we are over capacity in this time, considering the economic situation we are in, and we needed to tighten our capacity, so we are getting rid of some of those older assets.
Not the ones that were, not the newer 777s.
No,
that
not
were
the newer 777s.
Okay,
That's the older 777-200.
And of course, there's quite a lot of mystery around how KQ acquired its Dreamliners, and this has been circulating quite freely. Please explain to us in plain terms why offshore companies and tax havens were formed to handle these purchases. And people are asking why were deep-pocketed Kenyans involved in this?
Terian, don't believe everything you read in social media.
So you're saying this is not true?
Well, if you go to our annual accounts, we actually, on an annual basis, and it's been there from eons, when you're acquiring aircrafts, and not dissimilar to any other assets, big assets, maritime assets, etc., you acquire those through special purpose vehicles. And the reason is you have a financier, who is a banker, who is giving you long-term money, and you have the company like Kenya Airways, which is actually buying. So the asset is put within what is called a special purpose vehicle, and then over time you pay for it, and when you finish paying for it, the asset transfers to you from that special purpose vehicle. It's as simple as that. It's a, it's a financing arrangement.
So the special purpose vehicles are the ones that are registered in the tax havens?
Correct.
And they're legal and they're...
Totally above board.
All right, let's talk about hedging, which of course is a bet. And for the benefit of our audience, it's basically locking down the price of fuel such that even if there are market fluctuations, oil fluctuations, or the price of oil fluctuating globally, you still have a good price to deal with. Now, most of your hedges, of course, were done when the fuel price was high. Is there a chance that KQ will be reviewing this? I've understood maybe there are 2 reviews currently going on or will be started soon.
So we hedge. Hedging is a strategy, is a risk management strategy, because fuel cost is probably 40% of our cost of business. And so we must hedge in order to secure our price. Now, from a hedging point of view, over the last 3 years, we've been in the money from a hedge point of view. Nobody anticipated internationally that fuel prices would drop.
Yeah.
And the way we hedge certain lots over time, small lots over a period of time. We hedge, our board gives us the latitude to hedge up to 80% of our fuel over 1 year. And it's about making sure that we have a certainty of what our fuel price will be. So obviously today, as the fuel price has gone down, we have a more expensive fuel bill today, but it will translate, and not different from any other international airline that actually is doing hedging. And today, we've reduced the level of hedge book, because as hedges expire, we are taking advantage of the current fuel price. So it's going step by step.
How long are your hedges usually?
They have different durations. It is not just, you don't take a 12-month period. You take 3 months, 6 months, 2 months, just based on what the ruling fuel price is and what the financial risk you're taking is. I
was reading about the international airlines and how they're coping with fuel, and it was interesting to see that China's government has actually gone a step further. And I know probably China might not be the best example to use, but China has banned all its airlines from hedging. Is that something that Kenya Airways would do?
China, it's up to China to decide what they want to do. I think we are taking a risk management strategy that allows us to have certainty. And it's not about gambling, because you have an upside and you have a downside, and there is an exposure below which we don't get penalized. Yes.
Let's talk about fares. IATA projected that due to the dip in oil prices globally, and that fares should at least go down by about 5.1% in 2015. Are you in agreement with that projection? And if so, when are we going to see a reduction of costs on KQ?
So fares are driven by market forces, and we've seen some transition definitely in fares. But you must remember that we are also in a competitive environment. So it depends on what routes we are flying and how late somebody is booking. You can't determine and say that this is a fare that will apply. Kenyans, for example, are late bookers typically, and you find that there are people who plan their trips very early, and the others who plan their trips very late. From a business point of view, we present, say, Mombasa, 10 flights a day. 10% of Kenyans book flights last minute, the last day of travel. So inevitably, they'll end up paying a slightly higher price than the person who booked a month before. If you ask a lot of people today whether they've actually planned their Easter holidays and booked their tickets, maybe 50% will have, 50% wouldn't have.
Probably even less. I know Kenyans with that. Let's talk about competition, or the lack of it, because KQ has been accused severally of monopolizing air travel, not just within the country, but outside as well. What's your response to that?
We're in a very competitive environment, Teria, and if you look at aviation today, which airline doesn't fly to Nairobi? We don't control this hub, international traffic. Everybody flies here.
But you control Kenya and you control East Africa.
Well, that's nuanced, because we have actually done a lot of work to actually deepen integration. We are right ahead of the curve in terms of driving connectivity to Kigali, to Entebbe, to Dar es Salaam, to Juba, and that's part of the role we are actually playing. If competition doesn't survive in that sort of environment, then it's tough. It shows you how tough it is. Aviation industry is not easy to run. And
some have even said that KQ has been behind the barring of entry of some of the airlines into the space. Case in point, FastJet, as well as the entry of what was supposed to be Kenya's first budget airline, and that was One Jet One, which didn't even hit the runway. You know, what would you say about that? Has KQ barred anyone from entering?
I think you have people always speculating about reasons why not. There are rules and regulations around how you run aviation companies and how you run certain routes, because these are controlled by bilaterals.
And but you know, you can also say you can't fight the government because you are the government. That means you set the rules.
Tariana,
and you can bully the
We are not the government.
Ones.
Government is a shareholder. Kenyans actually are the majority shareholders in Kenya Airways, not the government of Kenya.
All right. KLM, which is your partner, is flying to Dar and Entebbe, among other key routes that KQ is currently serving. Isn't that counterproductive?
It is complementary.
It's complementary.
If you think
so is there an arrangement?
It is complementary. If you think about the way people fly, Entebbe, you can fly from Entebbe to London. You can fly via Qatar. You can fly via Emirates. You can fly via Turkish. You can fly via Nairobi, or go directly. So people make their choices. And what we have done with KLM, who we have had a joint venture for a very long time, is actually expanded our joint venture arrangement to give you the flexibility. You can fly from Entebbe via Nairobi to London and come back, or Amsterdam and come back directly. So it's just giving you that wide choice, and it's about deepening the space and competitiveness. KLM has been flying to Entebbe and Dar es Salaam for more than 10 years.
From Nairobi?
No.
Okay.
They don't fly from, they go directly Amsterdam, Entebbe, Amsterdam, Dar es Salaam.
All right. What happened to the direct flights from Rome to Nairobi, given that Italy is perhaps the only one of those key markets that hasn't had a travel advisory against Kenya?
2 or 3 years ago, we found that we were actually not running the right aircraft to Italy. We were running the 737, which was not an appropriate product for that market. And we didn't have enough aircraft, so the wide body range, to actually fly to those routes. Today we fly. In fact, I see that the Italian market is actually growing into Kenya. We fly them through our other hub points that we fly into Paris, Amsterdam, or London. And we will always explore the possibility, if we see that there's critical mass, to do direct flights.
Let's talk about KQ's financial position. How's the airline staying afloat? I mean, the aviation industry globally has actually gone through quite some turbulent times. KQ as an airline has also gone through turbulent times. How are you paying your staff?
We announced in November, when we announced our results, that we were going through a refinancing exercise. We announced that we were in a tough financial period. We are in debt. And we are looking to restructure part of that debt. So how am I paying my staff today? I'm paying through debt. But you know, it's important to also take the view that we are coming from a very tough place, from a business environment. And part of the work we are doing is to build the building blocks to come out of our loss position, to be more cash generative, to reduce the level of liability that we have.
So are we seeing a likely fresh injection of capital?
I would not like to comment about fresh injection of capital. We are engaging. It's still early days because we're just about to appoint a financial advisor to actually work through the different options. We had said when we announced our results that we're going to look at probably a long-term bond, and that could be combined with maybe some injection. But I think it would be premature to talk about capital injection.
Government bailout?
Government is a shareholder. I'm not sure we are yet at a point where we are talking about a bailout.
All right. Are you satisfied with the pace of JKIA's modernization? I know you mentioned earlier when we just started that the modernization is going on pretty well. Are you satisfied with how fast it's going or how slow it's going?
I think there's work to do. definitely. We are engaging constantly with KAA and the government on the improvements. Terminal 1A has given us a very good platform to sell Nairobi as a true hub. We've had the departure annex complete. We started to use it in August last year. We're really keen to see the arrivals annex complete. Then that will allow us to really have a good product and to improve the flow. And I think that's the challenge. And we've just got to keep the pressure up and see what other facilities improve. I mean, there's a lot of work that has gone in over the last year. New bays, new terminal. So we are hopeful that we will see that pressure and that delivery of infrastructure continue, because that is critical for us as a hub carrier to actually compete in this market.
All right, we'll take a quick break now. We'll be back with more with Mbuvi Ngunze, and after this break we'll be getting up close and personal, just finding out a few things about him. Don't go too far. Welcome back. You're watching Citizen Business Center, and we have been talking to the CEO of Kenya Airways, Mbuvi Ngunze. We're just about to get up close and personal, but first I want to ask you about direct flights between Kenya and the U.S. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce hinted earlier this year that there's a likelihood of direct flights once a final review of security has been done at the airport. Is that still on course?
That's really at a government level. There's work to be done by government, I guess, on security. And there's also work to be done by our regulator, KCA, on some regulatory environment. So I think once those two things are established, that drives a Cat 1 status, and then we will evaluate our position as a business.
All right, tell me, when you reflect on all these challenges facing KQ, with you right there at the top, do you see your own individual reputation being at stake?
I think I wake up in the morning very passionate for the responsibility I have. I went for the job. I was given the job by the board, and we are doing much more than just something about Kenya. You know, the what for KQ is about the sustainable development of Africa. And when I wake up, this afternoon I was addressing some of my teams who are station managers stationed in 50+ stations, and I told them the thing we are doing is much larger than what we are. We carry a very heavy responsibility also as staff and employees of Kenya Airways, because we are carrying the name of Kenya, but we are also carrying the hopes and aspirations of Africa. And that's why I say at our core purpose, it's about the sustainable development of Africa.
Do you feel that they share the same hope and passion?
Step by step. When I engage with my staff, I mean this afternoon when I go on the ramp, when I go into the aircraft to meet pilots, to meet cabin crew, when I'm talking to staff in finance or in supply chain and technical. This morning I was with my management team on the shop floor talking to the technical team about some gembas they are doing and improvements, and I see a strong engagement with the work that they do. And all these people are building every day the brand of Kenya Airways.
All right, and there's a lot of negative sentiment from passengers. I know you're talking about your staff, and I know I'm supposed to be asking you a few other personal questions about leading KQ, but all these challenges that passengers are facing, from delays, from cancellations, will there be a time when we can actually say, you know what, I believe in KQ?
I think, you know, sometimes we could also be caught up in history. And I think if I look at the performance of KQ, when I look at the on-time departure performance, when I look at the service delivery, even from surveys that we've been doing, very strong. When I look at the feedback we get from our passengers, some very positive feedback, but some opportunities to improve. But the points in terms of those which are giving feedback from a negative sense are actually going down, which is very positive, and it's very encouraging. And my team work very hard to actually drive that customer engagement and that feedback, and, you know, kudos to them. They work, of course, consistently keeping the customer journey and keeping the guest engaged right across the journey is a tough thing.
Tell me, what will success look like under your watch at Kenya Airways?
Our vision is very clear, is to be the pride of Africa, and we said that to be the pride of Africa by inspiring our people and delighting our guests, all these things consistently. The things I'm focusing on today in this period is to make sure that we have commercial and financial efficiency, very important for me, that our customer engagement and customer experience is very is key and being done well, that we have a safe and reliable operation, because that's really our license to operate. And the fourth thing is to make sure that our people and stakeholders are well engaged. Those are things that I'm looking at. Those are things that I'm focused on.
All right. And we wish you all the best with that, even with all the negative sentiments. Let's go play a game of darts.
Ladies first.
Thank you very much. And I'm just curious if the other Ngunze at CBA is a relative of yours. And if indeed he is, I'd like to meet your parents.
He's my senior brother.
Okay.
And I hope my mother is watching.
All right. Closer than mine.
Okay, so I'm supposed to go inside?
No one makes the bull's eye.
Oh, well. Tough.
All right. Tough game. Indeed, Michael?
Well, that's a good one. It's not very tough, though, but I think with a little practice we can get there.
I think so, too.
Wow.
Michael saying that as if he got the bullseye at any one point. If anything, you were on that last circle.
Well, for most of us, a tortoise is a creature best left in the wild, or at the best in the zoo. But for Joseph Chesire, a farmer based in Mogotio, Baringo County, the slow-moving reptiles have become a source of livelihood akin to keeping other domesticated livestock. Dennis Otieno takes a look at Joseph's unique game farming business on this week's edition of Smart Farm.